Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 11 of The Mindset. I'm your host, Christopher Feldner, training architect with Ukeru Systems. And with me from ReLife, I have Reginald Reed. How are you doing today, Reginald?
I'm doing well, thanks.
So I appreciate you coming on here today. Want to kind of, we've talked a lot on here. We've talked a lot to other people about, our own history, what led us to the creation of Ukeru, basically why we had to do it, how it's helped us, how it's helped others. But sometimes when we go out and talk to people, it's one thing to be the ones that are promoting this, teaching this, talking about our experience with it. But it's another thing when you hear about other people that have had similar struggles in a similar setting and how they've been able to pull things around. I was even thinking, this past week I was training a new school system, and they were talking about a lot of the resistance and mindset of teachers and staff when it came to, you know, being very disciplined, punishment focused, and compliance driven, things of that nature. So when they said, how would you like to talk to Reginald Reed on here? I was like, he'd be a good one to talk about all this. So without getting into too much, give us a little background, if you would, about who you are and where you work.
Okay. Well, again, I'm Reginald Reed. I'm the principal at ReLife here in Puyallup, Washington. We are we're a special education behavior school. Our student capacity is about 60, which may not seem like a lot, but you're talking about 60 kids who at any given time could turn a classroom, a wing, or an entire school on its ear and shut it down if they wanted to. So when the behaviors act up, 60 could easily be 300. Um, we um, we are a second grade through 12th grade model. We operate three wings, elementary, middle, and high school. And yeah, we're just um, Ukeru couldn't have come in a better time for us. I guess I'll open it up like that.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges, the backgrounds of the students that you serve in your school.
Our students are primarily, we deal with, again, so they're special education behavior kids, primarily extreme ADD,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, obsessive compulsive, oppositional defiant, high functioning autism, and some other, conduct disorders. And that's kind of our population.
Yeah. I like that you put that out there because some people might look at, 60, or they might have a certain type of individual in their mind. But I think what you just described, no one would describe that as an easy population, right? So, what were things like before, or what what made you seek a different approach to how y'all were work with your kids?
Well, the interesting thing for me is um, I came from a comprehensive school.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I came here as the assistant principal, and I've been here for 6 years now, I've been the principal for the last 3 years. When I came here, I didn't really know what to expect because, like most principals, if you're in a comprehensive school, you always have that classroom or two, where you have those extreme behavior kids. But
Yeah.
the truth is, if you don't really want to deal with those kids, you don't really have to, and they are referred to. A lot of principals are, those kids. Um, I mean, um, so I didn't know what to expect. When I got
Mm-hmm.
here at the time, like a lot of schools, we were different types of programs, had different forms of, restraints and holds. And so the model was, hands on. And so I just, that was the model. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, this is different, but wow, this is effective. And I'll be honest with you, I thought um, this is how you kind of have to handle this population sometimes. But then after a while, you
Mm-hmm.
start seeing that some people move to the extreme too fast.
Yeah.
And then once you get into it for a while, you kind of look at it and start going, do I have staff and wonderful human beings, but are children being baited?
Mm-hmm.
Are we letting our own emotions get in the way because
Mm-hmm.
we have an out. We have a place where we can draw the line and pull rank, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then the moment for me was one day. I mean, I have 5 children, and at the time when I came here, I mean, 4 children in the home, but my oldest was in high school. I had one in middle school, one in elementary school, and one in daycare. And I'll never forget the day I responded to a call, and the student was in a hold, and the hold was completely appropriate and it was being done correctly. But the child is screaming for them to let him up. And I
Yeah.
looked at that child, and all of a sudden, I saw, and I kid you not, I saw the face of, at the time, my middle school son.
Hmm.
And I just thought, dear God, I can't do this. And I just teared up. And I immediately just got down on the floor next to the child and I started talking to him over the screaming. And I said, listen, I'm going to count to three. And when I count to three, everybody's going to let go. And there's 4 walls in here. You can go to that wall or that wall, but just not these two. And as long as you go to either one of those 2 walls, nobody's going to touch you.
Hmm.
And I didn't wait for the staff to say yay or nay. I mean, I was the assistant principal. I just came in. Okay, it was wrong because I just took over the whole situation. I know that, but I just couldn't handle it.
Hmm.
And I counted to three. Everybody got up. They all walked up. Kid ran to the wall. We were fine, but I just remember walking out of there thinking, I can't do this anymore. We've got to figure something else out. And what happened was right about that time. I mean, we were doing a lot of restraints, like a lot of people were. It was a lot of restraints.
Hmm.
The CDC conference was in Portland that year. We went down there and we saw Ukeru.
Hmm.
And the other assistant principal and I immediately were like, it was like the Holy Grail. It's like heaven had opened. It's like, that's it. And we immediately ran to the Ukeru people
Hmm.
and they're talking about our program and listening to them talk to us. And we're like, yes. So we went back to our principal and it was like, no.
Hmm.
And we were like, devastated.
Yeah.
And I remember we said, whenever the opportunity presents itself, this is where we're going. Because we literally, um, we just needed something else.
Yeah.
We trauma on top of trauma. It just wasn't working.
Right.
And it just, I mean, I know this sounds, for whoever listens to this, you just got to know what I'm telling you. This is real life stuff.
Hmm.
I have not been coached. I'm just telling you my story. This is real stuff
Right.
in my school right now.
We didn't give you a Venmo or anything in between.
No, I mean, but we needed something else. And this
Hmm.
was the something else. I mean, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I'll just say, um, the last year that we did the program prior to Ukeru, we had 793 physical restraints. And this is an aggressive population. But let me back up and tell you,
Hmm.
there's only 60 of them. So you
Yeah.
break that down however you want. The first year that we implemented Ukeru, we went from 793 restraints to 24.
Wow.
And I'm telling you now, the biggest change, because the kids didn't change, their behaviors didn't change. What changed was the expectation of the staff because we had a different tool that we could expect them to use,
Hmm.
and the mental shift that came with the training of Ukero and that deeper understanding about the brain, how the brain works, how the brain receives and processes information, and what it really meant or means to be trauma informed.
Hmm. Well, there's two things I want to ask you. Well, there's several things, but two things right off before I lose track. So in the beginning, when you you set up the assistant principal, right? First went to the conference. When you brought it back, what was the rationale for deciding against it that you were given at the time, if you remember?
I think the rationale, I think it was twofold. I think part of it was um, we've seen that that's not going to work for our kids.
Hmm.
And part of it was just, no, I don't want to do it.
Hmm.
The both of us, the two assistant principals, we were like, this is the thing. This is it. We know. And it was just, no, I don't want to do it. That's what I believe was
Yeah.
the rationale. The answer was just no, it won't work for our kids.
Well, and that's interesting because, sometimes we'll get a really resistant group when we first train them, or we'll hear that when we're exhibiting at conferences. Oh, I'm sure that works for those young little kids, but we've got, and they talk about the giant NBA style players that are all mixed martial artists, when you hear them talk. Or on the flip side, the ones will be like, well, that might work for the older ones, but our younger ones are so fast and wiry. So we get both sides of that argument. But I think that what gets missed in there is what you're doing now, putting hands on people, isn't working, right? Because it's not just a matter of having to do the restraint. There's also, at the very basic level, the intrusion that happens. Most people aren't physically coordinated enough to run in and put hands on in a technical fashion. And also, you're not teaching anything different, right?
Right. Right.
Right. It's kind of worst case scenario, which falls into the line of most criteria, right? Imminent threat of harm to self or others. But you also mentioned it gets overused a lot too, right?
Yeah.
Because there's ways to get around it. I pick at the kid till they explode, then I could say, oh, this person's being unsafe and so on with it. So you mentioned, the behaviors didn't change, right? The students weren't changing, but yet you went from almost 800 restraints down to, what was it in the first year?
24.
24. So how did that happen? Like what something changed. So what changed?
I'll tell you, because when we adopted Ukeru and we said we were going to go into Ukeru, it was the spring of the 1920 school year
Mm-hmm.
was when the principal moved on and we were kind of running ReLife by committee. And we knew that coming into 2021, we were going to be an Ukeru school. And so I sent at that point the assistant principal and the dean of students they went to see you guys and they got trained. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember even them saying when they came back, they were on the plane saying, we don't know if this is gonna work. But
Mm-hmm.
and they came back and they told us what you guys told them. They talked to me and we set it up. We did our introduction to the staff. And the first thing that changed, um, and this is what I would say to any principals or leaders who are looking at this, is the mentality of the leadership. Because we had our staff
Mm-hmm.
meeting, they introduced it, and I stood up as the building principal and I said, as a building, we here are 100% committed to this program. And if you can't get behind that, then I am 100% committed to helping you find somewhere else to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was how we started that training. And I think that's the first piece is you got to have strong leadership. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
be, change is
Yep.
hard for everybody. But that was what changed first was the leaders in the building said, we're not going northerly, we're going due north. You're either
Right.
with us or you're against us.
And that's that's not easy for a lot of folks, right? Because we've had a lot of worry before with folks, looking to do this or that have started doing this, where they're like, well, we don't want to push it too much or spread it too broad at first because we're afraid that people will just mass leave. So how would you advise folks that with that type of concern, or any recommendation you can give as far as how to go about it?
Well, what I would say is just um, understand that people might leave.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I didn't lose staff. Staff didn't leave here because we shifted to Ukeru.
Yeah.
I mean, and granted, we shifted to Ukeru as we're coming out of COVID. I had
Mm,
staff leaving here because they didn't agree with the philosophy around what we were doing around COVID. But
mm,
you just have to treat it like any other form of attrition.
mm-hmm.
Everything isn't for everybody. And that's okay because as people decide this isn't for them and they leave, other people will show up who it is for.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, I've had staff who have left, um, but I have not had difficulty replacing them with people who wanted to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the staff who are here now who said this won't work, you know what? Once they experienced it and they really saw how it worked, the first
Mm-hmm.
time that kid went after them or whatever, and they put that pad up there and that kid was whacking on that pad and not them, they got it. You know, they didn't have to rebuild this relationship. It wasn't traumatic. The kid had
Mm-hmm.
the pad, they let go of the pad, the kid threw the pad, then everybody laughed. You know, it literally, it, it, you know, that I hate the term, but it was a game changer.
Yeah.
It's just because it's the mentality. And I mean, people said, our staff even said, well, what am I supposed to do with this just blue mat? This isn't going to work. How am I supposed to do? And we had to remind them, you know, before the blue mat, you didn't have anything. It
Yeah.
was just you and your bare hands. What do you mean? And then, you know, I guess I lead from a very different place. I mean, I am grounded in my faith and I lead with that. And so I'm not going to sit here and preach to people because we're all different. But here's what I would say. If you know that what you're doing is right, if you
Mm-hmm.
know it in your heart and you know it in your head, it just works out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you validate something intellectually, you validate it spiritually, and you validate it emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And if those three things check out, you know, 2 points make a straight line, the third one confirms it. You
Mm-hmm.
just go and it works. And it worked and it has worked for us. And you know, we're not perfect, but I'll tell you, 793 to 24. 2021, there were 24 restraints.
Mm-hmm.
21, 22, there were 18 or 12.
Mm.
This last year, I think there were six.
Wow.
And they were with the same two or three kids, and they all lasted less than 30 seconds. And it was really not, they weren't really restraints. It was really a lot more of the, to get into the technical part, it was more, they were what I would call, they were appropriate, but they were just aggressive, safe turns where they had
Gotcha.
to be done like multiple times in a row. But I
Yeah.
mean, we have basically, you know, the hands on thing is kind of like it's gone the way of the dinosaur here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, you know, 2.5 years.
Wow.
And I've got staff in this building who have no recollection. They weren't even here. They've never seen us go hands on.
Hmm.
And that is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Right.
So I mean, I don't know what else that is an amazing thing to know. And we've hired a lot of staff because people have moved on because they've gotten jobs or gotten promoted or
Sure.
whatever. But I've got probably a third to almost half of this building who've never been in a 2 or 3 or 4 point restraint.
Mm-hmm.
They've never
That's
even,
great.
they have no concept of any of those other programs because we've never done it. And that would be one more thing. I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but
Mm-hmm.
for anybody who's thinking about doing this, um, and this might be a little counterintuitive to what you guys say, but for our population, if you've got another program that you use when you learn Ukeru, you got to drop that other certification like ASAP. Because in times of crisis, people will revert back to what they know.
Yeah.
So we didn't renew it. We just said, you can't do it. This is all we got. And I mean, literally, you know, it's kind of like you go forward and you burn your ships. You know, you burn the bridge. We're going to do this or we're going to die on the shore.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: how would you answer someone who maybe they're local to you and they've heard that you're using a Ukeru and they say, "Well, Reginald, I think that if you block, you're encouraging them to be aggressive. You're reinforcing aggressive behavior." How would you respond to that person?
I would say to them, first off, um, if all you're doing is exclusively blocking, first off, you're probably not using the program correctly.
Right.
You know, that's the first thing I would say, because we only block when they're coming after us.
Mm-hmm.
And then you only block once or twice, and then you just give them the pad and you run, to which the kids then start laughing and it's over.
Mm-hmm.
or will block if they're like banging their head on something. That's
Hmm.
totally different. But you're not reinforcing anything because you're not teaching them to attack you. You're teaching them that if they're going to do that, you're just going to get away from the situation. I would say to somebody, if that's what you think, you just don't understand how it works, and you have to be in it and experience it, because it's not like that. It's not like you're standing there in a boxing ring going blow to blow with somebody. It's not
Right.
like that at all.
Right. Well, I think a lot of times when people have that mentality, it also goes hand in hand with the idea of there needs to be some retribution for the staff when they act like this.
Yep.
And actually, I've had two different educators from two different states in training use this exact phrase. Sometimes we want our pound of flesh.
Yes.
Right.
I've heard that phrase
Yeah.
here. Yeah. And that's the other thing. That's part of the mentality. Is one thing that we are increasing this year, aside from the professional development with that we do with Ukeru and all of our other things, is we
Hmm.
have to do. There's got to be some self. Like I call it PD squared,
Hmm.
because there's professional development, but then there's also personal development,
Hmm.
and people have to do some introspecting. You've got to do some work on you as a human being to understand that this isn't, it's not tit for tat, and
Yeah.
it never should be when you work with children. But you're not, we're not coming back on Tuesday to get even because of what happened on Monday.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Well, I think to me, it all comes down to the beginning of the education field, the behavioral mental health field of instituting that containment corrections mindset and then planting it in a setting where it never belonged in the first place, right?
totally agree.
And while, yes, here in 2023, I would say, well, I can at least speak to our own culture here in the US, there's more push to be tolerant and kind and patient. I think that we're all human beings. When people are under duress and someone has spit at you, they've said things, they've tore up your room that you've spent a lot of time, decorating everything, it's natural to have negative feelings about it. But I think the big thing is we have to try to understand that there's a reason behind it. It's not just that someone's bad or, there's a reason. There's a reason why someone would do that.
Right.
Like I can think after doing a debriefing back home years ago, there was a young man that was one of our staff, and he was just really struggling with letting go of this behavior that one of our individuals exhibited. And he was talking to me. He's like, I'm having trouble shaking it. I don't understand, like, why you would do that. I said, well, think about this. What would it take you to do what that individual did? Like, what kind of a mental state, like, what would someone have to do to you? Something that would have to go wrong to make you, like, just do that. And I think that's the first time, and that's really why more and more as we teach Ukeru, we talk as much about staff when it comes to trauma and all these other aspects as we do our students, because it's not like we are some padded, we've got it all together all times, just because we're staff. So trying to get people to see that other side, um, the empathy piece,
Yes, that's it right
right?
there.
And we were talking to a potential new school system recently, and they were asking us, how does Ukeru help marginalized youth? And I was like, well, there's several ways. One's folks that fall into those categories are historically more restrained and secluded than everyone else. I said, so by nature of teaching something that keeps you away from the physical aspect, by offering another physical aspect addresses that. Then when you get into the comfort versus control piece, even more so. But it is interesting because, and you've probably, well, you did run into this when you started implementing. Some folks really struggle with the philosophy of comfort versus control.
Yeah, they feel like, you know, we're not. teaching these kids anything, or they're getting away with things, or they're
Yeah.
manipulating the situation. Yeah.
Right.
And then sometimes all you have to do is say, well, so what is it when, and I've had to do this with my own staff sometimes, like, so when you do this thing,
Hmm.
would you like me to be as punitive to you as your supervisor as you are to those kids when you do something? Or would you
Right.
like me, or would you like to exhibit the same amount of grace to them as I give to you?
Hmm. Yeah.
And those are the conversations that we really do have. And you know, I also don't want anybody who's listening to this later to, you know, this sitting in my chair, sitting in any chair, no principal's job is easy. Hard
Hmm.
conversations are hard.
Yeah.
And I don't need to make it sound like I just, call people in here and just boom, boom, boom. It is hard because I
Yeah.
care about my staff,
Hmm.
but there is always the balance between caring and leading, or
Yeah.
caring and doing your job. And I can't, the fact that I care about them is the reason why I don't let them do things that could hurt kids or that
Hmm.
could hurt themselves. I mean, you know, I've talked about this once before. If you are willing to just look at Ukeru as a personal development platform,
Hmm.
um, I think I'm a pretty good dad. I think I'm a pretty good husband.
Hmm.
But I can tell you, there are things in Ukeru. Ukeru isn't just exclusively what you do at school.
Hmm.
There are things that I picked up in Ukeru in terms of communicating that I have applied in my own home at
Right.
home. And I don't have, quote, behavior kids. I mean, some days they might seem like it, but I don't have kids in my house that have IEPs. They're just kids. But I mean, there's ways that I can communicate. There's things I've learned with my
Hmm.
own children in my own house that I use from Ukeru that have helped to make my house run smoother.
Yeah.
So there's huge, huge opportunity just just to become a better human being
Hmm.
with this philosophy, because that's really, to me, what Ukeru is. It's not a program. I mean, my wife is Native Hawaiian, and she's got some Japanese, and her father's Japanese, and I've got a lot of friends from that culture. um this is a philosophy.
Hmm.
The whole concept of, to receive. I mean, if you just talk about honorific cultures in
Hmm.
general, there's a lot there about letting people save face,
Yeah.
giving people the opportunity to save face.
Hmm.
And to me, that's what we do. You give somebody who's having a hard time a way out.
Hmm.
That's all
Yeah.
it is. To me, if I boil it down at its most basic level, you don't have to win today. You know, if the kid calls me 1,001 names today, that's okay, because I know that we're going to be friends by tomorrow, because we're going to figure it out, because
Yeah.
they're going to look at me and say, I did all that and you came back.
Exactly.
You're still here. And what happens now is the proof is in the pudding. If these children think, if you come from the outside and you're not part of the staff, if these children, I mean, they line up, it's like a row of bodyguards. They're like, what do you want? And if I'm walking through the hall with somebody that my students don't know, they're like, so who are you? And why are
Hmm.
you here? And what are you here for with Dr. Reed? You
Yeah.
can't have him. But I mean, they know, you know, they're loyal because
Yeah.
we're loyal to them. And I think that that's what it comes down to. It's relationship building. That whole, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. That's real
Hmm.
stuff. I think that's what Ukeru is all about. It just it lets people save face. It lets people keep their dignity. And if you can let somebody maintain their dignity, you can get to them.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And a big piece, I mean, getting staff to see the students as people exhibiting behaviors, not as their behaviors, right? Uh, a line that I heard in a sermon a year or two ago that I was like, that applies to our field that I've been saying is behavior is the fruit, it's not the root, right? It's just an expression of what's going on. Doesn't mean that we like it, doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's not in and of itself the root cause, right? That's the big thing. Now, something that we stress a lot, and we came and did the debriefing training with you, but still, I feel like debriefing with staff about incidents is still something that's really, really underutilized as a whole across multiple platforms. What value do you see in really taking the time to do a good learning debriefing with the staff after, like, say, a restraint or a serious incident?
Well, first off, on the big level, if you don't debrief, then you miss the entire opportunity for any adult learning,
Mm-hmm.
first off. Um, and when the way that you guys taught us to do it and the way that we took that and interpreted it, we literally, I mean, the event might happen at 1:15 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
When we sit down to debrief, what we do is we call, everybody into the room who had any contact with that student all day long.
Yep.
And we literally start the debriefing at 8 o'clock in the morning because that's when the first person took that kid out of the car. And we go, okay. And the way that we do things here, somebody takes the kid out of their vehicle, they walk them so far, they hand them off to somebody else. That person walks them so far, they hand them off to somebody else. That third handoff is me because I'm at the front door.
Mm-hmm.
I check in with them. They come through the door. Then they meet the dean of students and one of the staff. From there, they meet the breakfast person. Then from there, they're at their classroom or they're at the next checkpoint. I mean, by the time a kid gets to class at ReLife, 6 or 8 people have laid eyes on this kid and had interaction before they get to their classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into that debriefing, it's like, okay, so I got him out of the car. It was like this. I handed him off to this person, and as far as I know, we were good. Then that
Mm-hmm.
person picks up from there. What we're able to do is we go through the whole process, and you say, okay, so it was at 9:15 where this kid first had a disruption, anything that was a negative experience. And so we
Mm-hmm.
we just keep going through every step from this teacher to this teacher to this teacher until and we go, oh, okay. So this was the point that maybe we didn't do as much as we should have. No blame, no shame.
Yeah.
But this is the place where maybe everything started to go bad. And it could have been 11:20, but we didn't catch it. So from 11:20, then something happened at 11:45, then something happened at 12 o'clock, and now it's 1:15. And the stages of de-escalation, the kids at stage 4, we're at the top of the roller coaster, and now the ride has to play out.
Hmm.
So what we do is we go back at that, we look at all of that, and we say, okay, what could we have done here? And then we have to decide if this happens again, what are we going to do? And we have to look at it and assess what's the likelihood that this thing will happen again.
Yeah.
Is it an issue with a personality with another adult? Do we need to swap somebody out? Do you and this child, do we need to create like a restorative justice situation where we need to have some conversation about what happened? Or we have to have a conversation about an understanding that this has to happen, even though you may not like it, but how do we get through it? But
Mm-hmm.
the debrief, a well done debrief allows everybody to just look at the totality. It allows us to take the child as an individual, as just an individual human being, and say, where did our system not serve this child well? Not where did we
Mm-hmm.
not serve him, not where did Reginald not serve him, but where did the system, where do we need to tighten up the system? Because tomorrow it could be another child in another situation. And so it's the constant state of being in a space of reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask that I forgot to ask about earlier, when you first started implementing there, and you did the orientation piece with the to students, kind of explain to them what this program was all about? Because I think a lot of times people have a little bit of stress or anxiety about what that's going to be like with their students, how they're going to take it. Like, what was it like with your kids there when you first started introducing this?
Our kids actually thought it was pretty funny. The primary kids were like, cool, we can build forts with these. I mean, and we're like, because you guys were like, yeah, just let them play with them, let them have them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just did. They built forts with them. Um, they discovered that they were great cushions to sit on outside. They could block the sun. They were great for blocking rain when it fell. Um, some of the middle school kids were, you know, kind of got into physics lessons because they were like, huh, when the wind blows this way, if I turn it this way, it blows right through it. If I turn it this way, I get kind of knocked over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we just let them to get totally desensitized to it. And it was funny. The first time one of our middle school kids actually went after a staff and he started slugging at that pad, he hit that pad about 3 or 4 times and he literally stopped and he said, this is stupid. And he said, can we just be done? And the teacher said, I'm done when you are. And ironically enough, this teacher was one of the teachers who was like, I don't know if this is going to work.
Yeah.
And she literally said, I get it. And she became one of the biggest supporters of Ukeru. And this kid was like, yeah, I'm over it. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've literally, as cliche as it may sound, I don't think we've had a physical instance with this kid since that day.
Yeah. Wow.
The kids are not as resistant as we as adults think they will be.
Mm.
You just put them out there, and it's like, okay, it became a new toy, a new fascination, and then it just became whatever. And now they walk past Ukeru mats all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're all over the walls in the classrooms, they're in the walls in the hallway. I mean, they're everywhere. And I mean, and we have situations now where if a support call is made, because we're all on radios, and if staff start running, the kids know the procedure. They know when they see staff take off, something's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
we literally will have kids who might be in the hallway and they'll see staff running. They will literally pick up the nearest pad and hold it out for you to grab and take with you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's like watching like those races on TV where you're running by and you got to pick up a cup of water off the table as you go by.
Mm-hmm.
Kids just held it out for you because they understand what is going on and what it is. It's the Ukeru mats are just a part of the environment,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids are completely unfazed by them. I think that the children becoming used to the Ukeru mats, I will tell you, anybody who think about this, that is the least of your worries.
Mm-hmm.
The children are resilient. They will snap to it like nothing. They will take to them. I mean, but you'll have to be okay with them throwing up and down the hall because they slide. You have to be okay with them flinging them around for a while, but they're just playing with them, and then they get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's it.
When they're kids,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
they find all the cool things to do with it. That, you give, you buy, it's like you buy your kid a toy and they have more fun with the box that it came in. That's how it is. They will figure out what to do with it. And you just kind of laugh
Mm-hmm.
and you roll with it. They're just part of the environment. I would say just don't sweat the kids adjusting to the Ukeru mats. That's not going to be the problem.
Yeah. Have you had any feedback from parents since you've been using Ukeru?
When we tell parents that we are a hands-off facility when they're touring the facility, they literally, and I no exaggeration, the sigh of relief that comes on. I mean, we've had moms and dads literally stop dead in the hallway because they'll say, "What's that mat?" And we
Mm-hmm.
explain what that is. They just literally start crying. I
Hmm.
mean, we've had moms, I've had dads, 6'2", 250-pound dads just break down crying in the hallway, right? Standing there in front of all of us and just say, Dear God, thank you so much. So you're
Hmm.
telling me that you're not going to grab my kid. He's not going to be pinned up against the wall. He's not going to be held down on the ground. No, we're not going to do that.
Yep.
Um, the parents, we have, there has not been one complaint from a parent about Ukeru, about a Ukeru mat, about the use of Ukeru. We've not had one parent complain, and that is no exaggeration.
Hmm. That's great. Wow. So you are down to 6 restraints,
Yep,
you said?
six
So
restraints in the 22-23 school year. Yep.
so how do you what are some of the things you do to try to keep the momentum going towards the downward trajectory with restraint usage? How do you encourage staff?
Well, we keep Ukeru in the forefront of everybody's mind here on staff. We do all kind of encouragements. We partnered with Character Strong, and so we have the word of the month, and we've got a
Hmm.
wall out front, and you've seen it where we've got the words
Yeah.
painted up here, and we don't erase them, we don't paint them down. We literally painted them right on the wall. It's very colorful. It's really cool. But we do all kind of incentives with our kids. We try to do as much positive stuff as we can for kids, and we focus our staff on focus on being positive. Like we have awards that we give to our kids. We have Character Strong awards. We have what we call ReLife Strong awards, for showing respect for, for all the ReLife promise, being responsible,
Hmm.
being safe, being a scholar. um, we do everything we can to focus on the things that we want to see, and not give attention to the things that we don't want to see,
Yeah. That's
because
great.
you get what you focus on is what you get.
Yeah. That's true. It's very true. Well, Reginald, I can't think of anything else to ask you. You've covered a lot of ground.
Well, listen, Ukeru is it's incredible. It really is. I don't know. I mean, you guys go all over the place. You train people in hundreds, thousands of places. Um, I can't imagine that you find people who say stuff much different than what I say. And to anybody out there who believes that this couldn't be true, or this wouldn't work for their population, or that, whatever, I'm telling you now, if they call you after they watch this and say, he can't be for real,
Hmm.
you have my direct line here at ReLife. Give it to them. Tell
All
them to
right.
call you. I'm telling you live on the podcast. Give them my extension. Tell them to call me. Um, if they can implement this, and when I say if they can, what I mean is if they've got the support of their district or of their
Hmm.
leadership, if they can implement it, they will get the results that they're looking for. But change, going from a program that is hands on to this that is totally hands off, a change of that magnitude, it needs to happen. I don't know what the laws are like in other states, but it needs to happen. But it is not for the faint of heart. So if they want to do it, bring your hard hat. I've got a pretty cool staff, but they didn't all come willingly. Some
Yeah.
came kicking and screaming, some packed and went other places. But
Yeah.
it was the right thing to do for kids. And I will stand by that any day.
And in the end, that's education and treatment, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. We have better relationships with our kids. We have better relationships with our families. And something that we didn't touch on, we have a much better relationship with our L&I department, because
Hmm.
they called us immediately and said, "What are you doing? We understand why you have more L&I claims than anybody else, but what happened? Because now we don't get hardly any from you."
Hmm.
And then they came, I mean, and they've sat here, they've gone through the training that you guys have done,
Hmm.
and they're like, wow. And they're pushing it to other parts of the agency, even. I mean, it pays dividends on multiple levels. So there is my soapbox. Again, I am not paid by Ukeru, but I'm telling you guys, this is where Ukeru programs like this, with the special education community, with the general ed community, with just kids who might be aggressive at times.
Hmm.
This is where we're going. This is where we need to go, because trauma on trauma is bad. It's just bad.
Yep. Yep.
So there you go. That's what I got.
All right. Well, Reginald, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here today.
Always a pleasure. It's great to see you. Good to talk to you. And, anytime, anything I can do to help.
All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you all next time.